Look, I'm pleased that you all are saying this has to be a whole government agenda. It has to involve Treasury and health and education. And that's ultimately why Fahana is saying, we'd like you to take this to Cabinet, we'd like to come to Cabinet ourselves, we'd like, if that's appropriate, to speak to other ministries, including the Treasury. And I'm pleased that you're saying it's about actions and not just words. We've got a lot of ideas about what the actions should be.
Absolutely.
We'll share a few of them with you now. I'd love to share more with you later. If I could just give a few examples. So one possibility would be a giant public information campaign, really seriously putting what this is about. The kind of thing that happened with AIDS, but on an even larger scale. Another possibility, if Fahana already mentioned, Cobra-style meetings. This is going to be a long emergency, but if we actually mean that it is an emergency, then we have to treat it like one. What do we do in emergencies? We have regular emergency meetings where we look across government at how things are going, and we target every ministry. Are you complying with this, etc.? With regard to a Treasury, an example would be a reduction of or elimination of the discount rate, which is a way in which we don't take the future seriously when we have the discount rate. And to come back to the framing of it, I'm delighted, Michael, that you are saying, let's think about this as a climate and ecological emergency, if that's the way we're going to go. And of course, most of the declarations so far haven't done that. Most of them have been climate emergency. Only a small minority have been ecological emergency as well. We think you've got to look at it in a holistic way, and that's something that you could help bring to the table. One more thing, it can't just be about mitigation. Mitigation is absolutely essential and foundational, but tragically, as Claire said, we're way past the point now where mitigation alone is going to be enough. We have to start getting serious about adaptation.
Yes.
We have to talk about transformative adaptation, about deep adaptation, and what that means is we have to be thinking about how we can change our whole society while recognizing that the climate is going to go on deteriorating for a while. And we also have to prepare ourselves for the possibility that things are going to get really out of hand and we're going to go into a collapse type situation. That's what deep adaptation means. So that means, for example, that one of the things that we'd love DEFRA to do is start thinking really seriously and taking this again across the whole of government about, are we prepared, are we taking a precautionary approach vis-a-vis the possibilities of our weather, i.e. our climate, spinning further out of control in the way it already has in the last few years. Last summer, we were just getting to the point where we were getting seriously near to crop failures in many parts of Britain, and then the weather broke in July. What if the weather this summer goes on baking us through into September, or even longer? Could happen. We need to be prepared for that. So we want to invite you to be really serious in addressing the public and in changing policy on agendas across the board on adaptation as well as mitigation and on ecology and not just climate. That's the kind of thing that it would actually mean to be serious about thinking, yeah, this is an emergency.
Yeah, I think there's some very important points. I might ask Robert to say something just to say. I think to go back just a second to one of your earlier points, which I was just going to touch on, you make the point very powerfully, as did Greta, about the way in which we actually measure our emissions and the way in which we can chart progress. I can't preempt what the Climate Change Committee is going to say tomorrow, but it is the case that they've heard and reflected on, as you mentioned earlier, some of those arguments. I'd love to know, once the report comes out, whether or not you think that it is, if it's certainly a step towards, I think, greater transparency. Does it go far enough? And there's a related issue, which is that we can hold ourselves as a government better to account, and we must, but also because this is a global challenge, how can we ensure that intergovernmental and other structures work in order to ensure that other nations and other actors are also better held to account? But so that's both an acknowledgement and a challenge for the future. On your point about mitigation and adaptation, I watched your talk where you explained the principles behind transformative and deep adaptation, and I found it incredibly powerful and thought-provoking. There are some things that we're doing here at DEFRA to think about specifically through the prism of water, what it is that we are going to have to do. And the head of the Environment Agency, James Bevan, has talked both about the impact of climate change and what we need to do, and the particular problems of water stress that we will face in the UK. But again, one of the points which I think Claire has made is that climate change is going to affect us all, and Felix's point about the damage that will be done in the future if we don't take steps is very powerful. But one of the other things which Claire has pointed out, and this is not to diminish the scale of the challenge, it's only to make the point that others are going to be affected more dramatically, The UK, because of its relatively benign geographical location and because of its relative wealth, is better able to shield itself than small island developing states or the global south overall. And so, part of the challenge is also thinking about what we can do internationally, as well as contemplating what the levels of adaptation are. Your point about working cross-government, I think, is absolutely right. There's a certain element of theatre and drama about a COBRA meeting, but the essence of government holding itself and others to account is critical. And Richard and I are working on an environment bill which will create, we hope in law, a set of statutory targets by which all of government will be held to account, not just on carbon, but in other areas as well. And one of the things that we'll want to do during the process of that bill is to make sure that people feel that these targets are appropriate, that they're not targets designed, as Sam hinted earlier, to allow us to pat ourselves on the back without any real change having occurred.